Hi, my name is Bhupen Sharma and welcome to my course Spring Boot, a complete guide from development to deployment. I'm a huge fan of Spring Framework and developing applications for more than 9 plus years, and from last 4 years I'm focusing on Spring Boot. What I like about Spring Boot is the opinionated approach to the configuration which make us become more productive by focusing on the business issues rather than focusing on the configurations which we faced during the normal Spring Framework development. In this course, we'll start from the basics and learn all the key features of Spring Boot from development to the deployment. Some of the major topics that we will cover in this course would be development environment setup, demo applications overview for the course, creation of REST web services, creation of sample web application, profile and properties, logging, security, and some of the production grade features like actuator. Then we end up with the deployment. So before we start this course, you should familiar with Maven and Spring Framework. And if you already have a knowledge on Spring Boot, it's good to have. So let's get started. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma and in this video we'll discuss about Spring Boot. So let's get started. Why Spring Boot? While working with the Spring Framework, you might have noticed below pain points. One of them is that provide all the compatible libraries for a specific version of Spring and configure them. Take example of Spring with Hibernate. So it should have a compatible version with Hibernate, otherwise your Spring might not work with Hibernate the way it's supposed to. The second point is majority of the time we configure data source, transaction manager, entity manager, beans, sources in the same way. Now we ask this question, if the majority of the time we are using the same configuration and tweaking them little bit based on our need, it would be better if we can automate them. Welcome to Spring Boot. And it is exactly doing what we talked earlier, and it is simplifying Spring for everyone. Now what is Spring Boot? It's a framework which has written on top of Spring to ease the bootstrapping and development of new Spring applications. As you see in the diagram, Spring Boot sits between the user and the Spring framework so that it can use the whole ecosystem of Spring. It provides default code and annotations to quick start your project. It builds production grade applications which is available for deployment as soon as possible with so many features like actuator, logging, security, so fast. It follows the opinionated configuration approach, so it faster your development time. So in simple word, if I have to explain Spring Boot, it is a Spring framework plus your embedded servers minus your XML bean configuration. So that is pretty much what Spring Boot defines itself. Now I have listed out few of the advantages. There are much more advantage, but few of them is it is very easy to integrate your Spring Boot applications with the Spring ecosystem, which includes JDBC, ORM, data, security, batch, and all sort of things, cloud. It has embedded HTTP servers like Tomcat and Jetty, which gives us the flexibility to start your applications faster, multiple mode of deployments as well. It has plugins. It provides a lot of plugin to develop and test your Spring Boot applications, and has a build tool like Maven and Gradle. Comes to limitations, there are not much limitations, but I found out one or two based on my experience. And one is that starting a new project is very easy in a Spring Boot, but if you're trying to convert your existing Spring MVC project or a Spring project to a Spring Boot, you find it a little frustrating because a lot of things has been auto-configured automatically in Spring Boot, and your Spring project might have those XMLs which is not very easy to automate them. So you might have to override your Spring Boot auto configuration classes, and that might be a little tricky and frustrating as well. And the second point is also more or less the same based on the first point, because we use opinionated approach. lot of things has been auto configured. Now if you don't want those auto configurations, you might have to tweak them or change them, and which can be a little frustrating. That's all for this video. Thank you guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we will discuss about the prerequisite for a Spring Boot project to work on, and how we can generate a sample Spring Boot project using a Spring Initializer UI or using IntelliJ. So let's get started. So what are the prerequisites we need for a Spring Boot project to start is, first of all, is the JDK 1.8 or 1. I think the newer version is 10. Build tool, either Maven or Gradle, or IDE based on your own preference. You can use IntelliJ, STS, Eclipse, or NetBeans. I prefer to use IntelliJ because I'm using most of the time. So now let's create a Spring Boot project using a Spring Initializer UI. So let's go to start.spring.io, and this is the Spring Initializer UI. Choose a Maven project with Java, and what is the Spring Boot version. Provide a basic information here. So let's say open.in, and I can switch to full version where it will show more detail for me, and I can choose these later. So let's open a blank project. Click on generate project, and this will download the zip file for me. And I can see this zip file has a Spring Boot project structure, and this is a blank structure with the basic classes. Now let's discuss about how you can create a Spring Boot project using IntelliJ. Okay, open IntelliJ and click on create new project, and you can see now a Spring Initializer here. Click next and say open.in demo and click next. Here also it's showing the dependencies here. I can choose, but I can go with a blank project right now, and then later on we can add more dependencies. What is the name of the project? Demo. And let's put on the download folder. Finish. No, let me create a demo here. Okay. So as you can see, it created a demo project and it has all those basic informations. That's all for this video. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we're gonna discuss about demo application overview. I took a sample application built from free version of Bootstrap 4. It's called as SB admin. You can go to free Bootstrap themes and then you can find that out. And I took a sample page that is called index.html, and then if you look at that page, it looks like a dashboard page. So we are going to work on that dashboard page during the whole course and apply whatever we learn. So I divided that dashboard page into 3 sections. Section 1 is basically the order received and then high level order summary. Section 2 is company revenue and bestseller category, and section 3 is employee information. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we are going to create a REST GET controller endpoint using a Spring Boot. So let's get started. Let's quickly create a project in Spring. I'm gonna use propane.in and say get rest endpoint get, and simply generate the project because it is a Maven Java with the latest version. Okay, I got my project. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open that is in my IntelliJ. So here's my IntelliJ, and I'm gonna import the project. Let's go rest endpoint get and then open. Perfect. So here we have our rest endpoint. So let's create a controller package, and then let's create a class called rest endpoint. Okay, we have to use annotation called rest controller. Now let's create a rest endpoint. So I'll say public course get endpoint, and then this will be return course. I'll say name and chapter count. We need to create this class. Let's create this class and say name let's generate a constructor, and a getter setter. So now we need to map the parameters. So let's say request parameter and say value equals to name. We need this request parameter to pass from the URL, and we can set a default value if you don't want to pass it. So default value will say Spring Boot, and then I'll say whether it is required or optional. So I'll make it optional, and then I assign the variable. Let me just duplicate that, and it will be chapter count. Default value will be 2, and then I'll say chapter count. So now and then I have to put a request mapping to create my endpoint. So let me just put straight away course. It'll be int. Okay, let's compile this project. Maven compile. Okay, there should be no it's done. Now let's run this application. And this application, Spring Boot application, has an embedded HTTP Tomcat container. So by default start with 8080 port. Let's test in the Postman. Okay, so here if I just put localhost 8080 and course and hit it, I'll get the default values. Now if I want different one, name equals Hybris, I'll get Hybris, and then I'll say chapter count equals 6. I'll get the same value. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we'll discuss about adding a REST post controller endpoint by using Spring Boot project. So let's get started. We need a project. I already have the project created just to save the time. What I did is I just copy all the controllers from the last lecture or video that we have created for the get endpoint. So we'll continue from there in a different project. So let's create let's return as string, and then I'll say save course, and then request body. I want course to be there, course, and then I say return your course named course dot get name save having with chapter count. So let's with 10 chapters, save successfully, saved successfully. Okay, so now return successfully. Let's use dot here, close it, save it and run. Okay, the thing is we need to do a request mapping. So let's do a request mapping and say method equals to request mapping dot post comma value equals, you'll say register, you'll say slash register course. Okay, let's compile this one and see whether it compiled. Compile. It compiled successfully, so now let's run it. Let's test in Postman how it works out. So I still have my old endpoint should work because it's a get endpoint. Yep, it's working. Now let's create a post and say register, the endpoint is register. Okay, register course, and if I hit it, it will throw me that the request body is missing, because if you see the code here, I say that my request body is a course, so I need to pass the course, which should be like this. So let's use this one and put into a row, and I'll paste it and make it a JSON. Looks better. So I'll say Jackson Jersey client, let's say like that, and then I'll say it has 2 chapters and post it. So send, and I'll get a message, your course name Jersey client with two chapters saved successfully with 200. Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we are going to discuss about Spring Boot properties that we are using. So let's get started. So there are a few things that I just want to tell about the properties. The idea of having a property is to have a lesser configurations when you compare it with the standard Spring framework. I can give you example. You have to put a data source in an XML file to configure your Oracle or MySQL, but now you can do the same thing using a property file in a Spring Boot. So there is a concept of default application properties in Spring Boot called application.properties. Whenever you create a project, it creates application.properties, and it auto configured with your project. So whatever the properties that you're gonna put, you can inject those properties in your classes. Where the application.properties there, it is in src main resource directory. So by using this default file, we don't have to explicitly register a property source or even provide a path to a property file, because by default it comes with configure. Now we can define another property source, or we can configure a path, but we can discuss that in later videos. So what are the properties Spring Boot provides? There are a lot of according to the Spring ecosystem. For example, Spring Batch has specific properties. If you are using a Spring Actuator, it has its own properties. If you are using JPA, it has its own properties. Tomcat has its own properties, Kafka, and all those things. The other major point is that we don't have to need to specify all the default properties in all the cases. We can specify them only on by demand. So either you want to change it, or you want there is a default configuration for anything, and then if you want to override it, then only we need to put it. So by using this property, it reduced a lot of XML configurations, and I gave you one of the best example is putting a JNDI or putting a data source in a normal Spring framework versus Spring Boot. Let's go through one of the project and let's see how these property things works. So let's start with creating a project. I'll say in and understand properties. And I'll take web and generate project. This project has been created. Now let's open the IntelliJ. So this is my project from the last video. Let's create another one. Open, and I'm gonna go understand property. I'm gonna restore it. Okay, let's compile it by as it is. Compile and see everything is good. Yep, it's compiled. So if you go and see here in main resource, you'll see this application.properties, and it is blank because we don't need to specify all the defaults. In case of any overrides, or you want to add your own properties, you might have to specify, but not in case of default properties. So before we do anything, let's just copy the old code to the before we move forward, let's copy the old controllers from the last videos that I created so that it will be easy to understand. So what I'm going to do is I just say copy, then I just put it here and say paste. Okay, so the controllers are there now, and let's build it again. So I didn't do anything related to properties. I just want to make sure that I'm able to build the project with the post controller and get controller. And then let's run this application. Yeah, it should start in 8080. Let's go ahead and test it by ourselves. A get call, and it is working. So now instead of 8080, I want my port to be 9090. So what I'll do is that I'll go here and say server dot port equals to 9090. So this is the first time I'm trying to put any property and saying that no, I don't want to use the default port. And then let's do that now. Let's clean, compile it, and see, run it. So now it is started as 9090. See here. So this request might not work because it is pointing to 8080. Yeah, so I'm not getting any response. So let's change to 90 and 90 here, and I can see it's working. So this is one of the example where I can define my properties. Now how to inject those properties if I want to inject. So let's create some properties. So what we'll do is we'll replace these default values with the property values. So let's do one thing. Let's create a properties. So it's a default. Let's create my own default dot course dot name equals to, I'll say SAP HANA, and then default dot course dot what is the field name? We can use the same field name, chapter count equals to 7, or let's put 3. Okay, so I created those properties. Now I want to inject those properties. So injecting those properties will be very simple. You have to just first create the type C name and type the annotation at the value, and then you provide the property name. So what you're doing is basically you are injecting this property to this variable, and then we'll do the same thing for the other one as well. So let's put int and chapter count. Okay, and then I'll say here chapter count is the property. So now I retrieve those properties in these values, but I have to use it. So what I'll do is I'll create another endpoint for get and say let me get my default properties. What is my default course? And then get default course Okay, and then here I'll go and just change the reference of the values. So here I can keep it like that. That's fine. I just need to make sure that it has this value. It has the value from the properties. So instead of chapters count, I can put chapters count here, because I just want to, I don't want to mess with this string with this one variable name, sorry. So let's compile this project and see whether it is working or not working. Okay, let's run the server again and let's use this one. So I should, if I use this endpoint, I should get these two things. It started, and then let's use my course, and I got this one. So I got the properties from whatever I provided in the properties file. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we'll discuss about profile specific properties and the hierarchical properties using configuration properties annotation. So let's get started. So let's go through a few of the bullet points about environment specific properties. So in Spring Boot, there is a built-in mechanism for targeting our different environments. When you're using .properties file, what you need to do is you simply say that application hyphen put any name and .properties. That any name can be any environment. You can say QA prod, stage pre-prod, or any other environment. And when you run your Spring Boot, you reference that property file using Spring profile active command. So what if you have more than one properties? So I have application.properties, I have application QA.properties, I have application prod.properties. So always the property that you are referencing while running your app, it take a precedent over everything. So let's see a sample project for that. So what I did is actually I created a project using Spring Initializer UI, and then I copied all the controller classes from the last demo, which has the REST endpoint and then the default properties that we have. So this is the main property file. Now let's say I want to use property for QA environment. So what I'll do is I'll copy and I'll create a hyphen QA.properties, and here I'll change my port 1991. Now in QA properties, I don't have this chapter count, but I have a course name. So I'll say SAP HANA and C4C. So let's save it. So I created a very environment specific property file. Now let's compile this project and see whether it is compiled or not. It's compiled. Now run. So when I'm running directly, you see that it is referencing to the 1990, which is my main application.property file. So it is not even considering this one, because we need to reference it that I want to run my project for this particular profile. So let's do one thing, and let's using mvn terminal command. So let's run from terminal. So mvn clean compile, and I'll say compiled, and I'll say mvn spring boot -run, and now I need to provide spring dot profiles dot active equals the QA, which is referencing to the QA file here. These spring profile active it creates a system variable which spring will pick it up. So when I run this way, you see that the following profile, so it will tell that the following profile are active, which is QA, and then you see it open at port as 1991. So now this QA property has the course name, but it doesn't have the chapter count. So what it will do is that it will override these two properties, but it still use third property from the main file. So let's try to call through a postman. Definitely this will not work because there is nothing run on 1990, so it will be 1991, and as soon as I hit it, it picks the name property from the active profile, but chapter count would picked from the main property file. So this is the way the profile specific properties work. Now let's go and discuss about hierarchical properties. We can use @configuration properties annotations where properties are grouped together. So I can group, and the best example is data source. I can say that data source dot username, data source dot URL, the password, the driver configurations. I can group together and then make it a property configuration. These type of properties are mostly type safe because since they're part of a Java object, so you can apply different patterns and all those things. You can apply validations. You can apply validations that it has. I don't want this property to be null. What is the minimum length? What is the maximum length? Or if you apply any regex pattern, you can apply that. Why we are choosing this approach? Because @value notation sometimes become cumbersome for many properties. So if you have so many properties, you have to write @value for everything, rather than you can have a component created and then you can reference through and you can auto wire that component and use it anywhere you want to use in form of getter and setter. So, and it supports both properties and YML files. So we are going to discuss about YML in the next video. Let's now focus on properties only. So let's see a sample project for this. So here I'm continuing with the same project. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little bit change here. One is I just put the property as course dot name course, just to make a grouping. So course dot rating equals to 5, and then course dot author equals to Bhupen. So course is here is a grouping. So now let's create a configuration. So I'll say course configuration file. Let's define with component so that it can be auto wired, and then it'll say configuration properties, and then I know I can map through course. Let's do this way, course. Okay, now let's define the properties. So I'll say string name chapter count, rating, and author. So it'll be and chapter count rating will be again int author. So let's generate getter and setter. Okay, so this creates a getter setter. Let's try to compile the project and see whether it's compiling or not. It's compiling. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is we need to test whether it is working. So let's first remove those. These are the injections. So now let's auto-wire it. So private course configuration, and I'll say course configuration, and at the rate let's use auto-wired. For a differential purpose, let's put these properties again just to have some kind of difference to show. So I'll put default dot course name and let's put default dot chapter count. So these two will be separate entity. I'll say here what is the latest thing that I'm learning is AWS and Docker. Let's see. So I have 45 chapters on this, ratings, and all that is same. So here I will still have the same properties. So these are the normal property injection, and this is basically I'm talking about the hierarchical properties. Now where I'm gonna use them, let's do another REST endpoint. Let's create another and say get properties. So I'll say get just to have get hierarchical hi. Yeah, it's a tough spelling. So I just create an endpoint for the hierarchy, and then instead of passing a course, I'll just say map. Let's put a map. Hash map. I'll say string, comma, object. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'll create this okay. No, or let's see, return map. So I return the map. What I'm going to do is map dot put name, comma, and I'm going to use configuration from course. So course configuration dot get name, and then I'm going to repeat for what is that next one? Chapter count, reading another chapter count, rating and author. Okay. Get chapter count, get rating, get author. Okay, so let's compile this and see any issues. Let's remove the request parameter because we don't need those. It is not required. Let's put this way and compile again. Okay, so now let's see, since we have all our REST endpoint ready and everything, just for to validate the type safe thing, let's change to rating to alphabet. Now here we define that as an integer and we pass it as a string. So when I try to compile this code now, it compiles successfully because these errors comes at the runtime, because that is the time they load the properties. Now I'm gonna run it. So here you see it says that the property course.rating is having a value VH because it's failed to convert. So this become a fail safe or type safe, so that we cannot mess with the properties. Now let's change with it and let's see. Now server is running at 1990 port. Let's check through Postman. 1990. If I call the old API, still I get the SAP HANA because my default property is still SAP HANA n3. Now if I use the different REST endpoint, I should have different values. Yeah, so I have author, name, chapter count, and rating. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we are going to discuss about using a YML instead of a properties file. So let's get started. So YML is another format of it's alternate to the properties file, and it automatically, Spring Boot automatically supports YML if you have a Snake YML library to your class path. YML is good for hierarchical property storage, and the profile specific storage means you can create a profile very easily with compared to .properties file. So Spring Framework provide two convenient classes that can be used to load YML document. Now one is YML property factory bean, which load YML as a property, and one is YML map factory bean load as a map where you have multiple profiles. You don't have to use those beans straight away because most of the time you don't have to phase these beans or you have to modify these beans. It's behind the scene. So what are the shortcomings of the YML file? So if you want to use a property source annotation where you'd want to refer your any property, specific property, to external source or internal source within the class path, then YML is not the right option. So there you have to use properties file. Apart from that, YML supports every other feature the way the property supports, and it has more convenient way actually. So let's run through a sample project and then understand how YML works. So this is the project that I have created from Spring Initializer UI, and I have copied everything that we have done until last demo, where we talk about properties, the hierarchy approach, the injection approach, different endpoints. So everything is there in this, so we can proceed further and understand how to use YML. So what I'm going to do is that we know this is my property. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file called application dot YAML. Now this YAML file and property file has difference, so if you know how to write server dot port, I'll say 9090, and then we have default dot course, so I'll say default course name, and then we have another one is chapter count. So name and chapter count is 3, name is SAP HANA. So I'm just converting our existing property file into a YAML. So let's run through a course. So course name, chapter count, rating, author. So it will be a name, chapter count, I think this is the one, chapter count. Let's do the same, chapter count, rating, author. So name will be AWS and Docker, and rest of things will be easy. 45, it'll be 5, and myself. Okay. So I just created convert a property into YAML. Let's remove the property file now and see how it works out. So I have now YAML. As soon as you put application.yml, your Spring Boot automatically recognize it and map it up. So let's try to compile this project. Terminal. Let's compile this project. Domain clean compile. And then run this project. Again, Spring Boot :run. So it started. Now let's check in Postman and our. So this was the last time when I checked the hierarchy of endpoint. So let's try to check again and then see whether it is same. Yep, I get the same response. Just to have a verification, I can say that AWS, Docker, and Mesos, just to make sure that it is referencing to the correct YAML file. So let's clean it, then run it. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and then it came here. Okay, so this is how we convert the properties versus YAML works. Now when it comes to hierarchy, where you want, not before hierarchy, let's talk about how we're gonna work with the profile specific, how we create a profile in YAML file. So first thing that we need to do is we need to tell which is the default profile that we need to pick. So Spring, then I say profile, and then I say dot active. I can use this. Yep, and I'll say QA instead of tab. Now this is one. How you're going to reference it, having a 3 lines, and it will tell whether these properties below these properties belongs to a particular profile. Now how we define that profile? Let's say, so spring dot profile and say def. So these properties will be part of a def profile like that, and then I can have a same to say QA, and I'll say 91 91. I'll put underscore everywhere just to have, so 0 50 underscore underscore, just to have differentiation between QA profile and dev profile. Now I know that my active profile is QA, so if I compile and run it, it should pick the QA profile. Yep, it picked the QA profile correctly, and it got failed. So let's see what is the failure reason. It's failed to start. Connector configure to listen on page. Port 9191. Ooh. Let's say 1991. That way. Yeah. So 1991. And now I should have the same but with underscore or zeros at the end. So I have zeros at the end and underscore. So it picked from the QA profile. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we'll discuss about the embedded Tomcat server. Now we have Jetty and Undertow as another servers, embedded servers with Spring Boot, but mostly we are gonna use Tomcat, so I'm just gonna discuss about Tomcat. So let's get started. So let's think about, if we don't have an embedded server, what we have to do exactly. So we need to create a web application with the format of WAR file, and then we have to have application servers, Tomcat, WebLogic, and their Glassfish, all those web servers. Then we have to deploy that WAR file. Now for deployment, either I can use the scripting or I can use Jenkins to deploy the WAR file. So there are multiple processes. So now if you think about like how much time it is gonna take the whole process, we are not sure, because your local Tomcat might not configure the way your production Tomcat is. So if you deploy your WAR file from your local environment to your production environment, there is a possibility that it might not work in the productions, because productions will have additional security features, firewall settings, and all those things. Now what if I create applications which has a deployable container unit by itself? And Spring Boot exactly did the same thing. They created applications which has a deployable unit with respect to Tomcat or Jetty or Undertow. Now what is the advantage I'll get it? One of the biggest advantage is it's easy to use. Second advantage is that it compatible with your microservice architecture, because you want your every unit to be independent unit, and you should be able to discover that those units. it is a standard applications, and then it is quickly testable. When I say quickly testable, means you have to just start your jar file and then immediately you can make your application up and running, which is quite fast. And if from developer's point of view, you can debug easily and all those things you can do. So yes, let's go through the let's create a sample project and then run through it and just understand. And let's run through the libraries. If I go, then what I can see is I can see Tomcat libraries. One is core, the EL, expression language, and the WebSocket. Let's use the terminal mvn clean compile. By default, it will start in 8080 port, and I can say embedded Tomcat application. Yeah, it started in 8080 port. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about how to run your Spring Boot application as a var instead of a traditional jar file. So let's get started. So let's create a project. Say Bhupen external var. I'm going to include only web and generate project. So the project has been generated. Right now it is mapped as a jar, so let's change to var. There are few changes that we need to do. Is one of the changes use a dependency where we say that Tomcat is provided. So let's say dependency, and then it'll be org.springframework.tomcat. Let's say framework.tom. Okay, is dot boot. I think boot. Yeah, artifact ID is Spring Boot starter Tomcat. Spring Boot starter Tomcat. Here you go. And then we need to define the scope as provided, so that Spring Boot knows that we are going to provide the Tomcat. Then a little bit of change. Let's do that change here. We need to extend Spring Boot servlet, because Spring Boot servlet initializer, and we need to override one of the method, which is configure. So let's do that, override, and then we need to override configure method. So once we do that, now if we run the application, it should generate a var file. Let's compile and package it. Once we package it, so here see we have a var file get created. We can deploy this var file to any application server. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this video we're gonna talk about how to configure logback for logging. Now logging by default is a part of Spring Boot application. As soon as you have a web dependency, it will come automatically, and then you can control logback logging through two ways. One is the property way, the application.property or application.yml, or you can control through logback.xml. So let's get started. So what I did is I created a project, logback logging, and then I just copied all my old controllers so that we have some informations, and then we have properties file here. So the first thing that we're going to try here is with the properties. So let's put logging.level and then put the package name where you want to put. So I'll say for Spring Framework web, use debug, and then for I can use my package for info purpose, info, and then let's run this and see what happens. As you see, there's no file got created, but things are logged inside the console. So let's put in the file. So we can put in the file by just using a property file and say logback logging.log. Save and run it again and see what happens. So now I can see here the file has been created. If I go inside this file, I can see informations are there. And so this is one way of logging using a property. And then one more thing that we can do here is we can define the patterns if we want to. I already have those pattern console. I can just put it and I can say that on console define this pattern, and then for the file do this pattern. So you can define consoles and patterns, console pattern and file pattern using a property. Let's run and see, did we see any changes? So I can see changes here. And let's see in the file. And I can see changes here as well. Previously it was like this format, and now it has a different format. So this is one way of doing it. The other way of doing is using XML. So let's try that way as well. I'm going to use the same configurations, but using an XML. So for XML, what we need to do is we need to just create a file called logback.xml or logback-spring.xml. So let's say logback.xml. I already have that XML prepared. Let's use that. What I'm doing is I'm saying for the file use logs and logback logging.log. We have a ruling policy as well. Whenever after a day, what is the log file name look like and where it will go. And then I have debug and debug for both of them, and then it is a file. So, and those patterns are defined here. So let's run it now, and yes, there's nothing in the property. So let's run it and see. Okay, I can see here the log folder has been created. If I go inside, I can see the information is passed on. Yes. Yeah. So this is the way we can do through XML. Now XML can have more feature, we can apply more feature, but the same feature can be applied through properties as well. So it's depend on your choice what you want and what is looking for. That's all for this video, guys. Thanks. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about how to configure log4j for logging. So let's get started. So what I did is I created a log4j logging sample project and I copied all my previous controllers. So the first thing, there are two things that we have to do for log4j configuration is, one is that exclusion of the default logback logging and inclusion of the log4j2 dependency. So let's do that. So we are gonna add I already have that exclusion list, so let's just take it from there and put it. So I'll have exclusion of the logging and then inclusion of the log4j dependency. So here I have added a log4j2 dependency. Now what I need to do is I need to add a log4j XML file. I can add YML as well, and I can add JSON as well. The name should be log4j. So I added this one here, and I need to define the file appenders, console, patterns, and all those things. So I already have a sample created. We can go through that sample XML. So here I created for a console, I created for file appenders, and then I put loggers where I define that okay, there is a boopin.in log4j logging package where you need to append into console as well as in file. And also you can do for the spring framework.web. The root level is error, so any error will automatically append it to console or file. So that's pretty much the configuration part, and let's see whether we are able to test it. So we are going to package it. So I got the error while compiling the project, but it created the log file. So because I put a reference of log folder, logs folder, and then inside that log4j logging, and I can see the log file has been created based on the pattern that we use for awk.springframework.web package and the package that I'm using. So let's fix this problem, but because there is no property defined here, so let me quickly grab those property from my last project to make it work. So I use these properties. Now let's run it again. Yeah, it's finished successfully. So, and I can see in the logging as well the same thing. So that's pretty much for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about what is JPA and what is Spring Data JPA. So let's get started. What is JPA? JPA stands for Java Persistent API and a Java specification for accessing, persisting, and managing a data between Java objects and database. For that we are using ORMs. One of the example is Hibernate, which allow you to map your entity classes into a relational mapping, so that once you connect with your database, your ORM framework will do the transactions, mapping, and query, all those things. And JPA is a specification to use URM. So it's provide you an interface to access those ORM frameworks. In this diagram below, you can see we have entity manager, entity net transaction, entity manager, factory, persistent, query inside a JPA. By using entity classes, we can connect to RDBMS, which is a relational database. So this is a standard JPA. What is Spring Data JPA? Spring Data JPA is a separate project within the Spring Data ecosystem that let you connect with different persistent kind of stores, both SQL and NoSQL, with much more easier approach. So connecting to JPA becomes much more easier in the Spring Data versus using a JPA standalone in the Spring framework. But if you see in the diagram below, that you'll find out that this is the specific area where, so if you see within this ecosystem, this part is the Spring Data JPA, and then you can connect to your relational database using JPA or JDBC, using a JPA repository or JDBC template. So what are the features Spring Data JPA provides? I took these features from the project Spring iOS Spring Data JPA URL, and I mentioned in the slide. But specifically, if I focus on, there are two major ones, is query DSL, and the other one is at query annotations at bootstrap time. These two things are the major ones where once I start implementing these query DSLs and query annotations, I feel that JPA become more advanced in terms of how you write your queries, how you make your queries more dynamics and all those things. So, and third thing is that enable JPA repository annotation at the pin class. When you use that and you apply your component scan, it will scan all your entities. And even though it can scan your entities from a jar file, if you provide the location of the package correctly during the component scan. That's it for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we're going to discuss about build the entity classes for the demo application. So in my lecture 4 I showed up demo applications which has login, dashboard, and register page using Bootstrap 4. So we are going to start working on that application and try to build that application as shown. So let's go through those slides again and understand what all the entities we have to create. So I can see that there is one entity which is order received. I need to create based on the month. I need to get the numbers. And there is an entity to collect all these informations about the main dashboard. There will be a company revenue, and then there is a bestseller category entity, and one will be employee information. So based on this page having 3 sections, I would say that I need to create almost 5 entity classes. So let's go ahead and start working on that. So what I did is I created a sample project called ecom dashboard, which is basically a plain Spring Boot project with the dependency of web and JPA. So by default, when you create a dependency with web and JPA and MySQL, it will come like that. The only thing that I did additional was to add with the Hibernate core and Hibernate entity manager. So these are 2 dependencies I added to use the entity objects. The other thing that we need to make sure is we need to have a schema which will allow us to connect from my Spring Boot project to the database. So I have I created a schema called ecom-app into my local MySQL database so that I can connect to that. So let's go ahead and connect to this schema and see whether it works or not. So in application.property, we need to put these 5 properties to define the data source URL, the username, the password, and the driver class. Since I'm using MySQL, it's MySQL class, and then I'm using JPA having it saying update. Update means any change in the entity structure in my POJ objects will, as soon as I run it, it will reflect in the DB. So now we will go ahead and start creating those entity classes. So what I did now is, just to cut short this video, I created those entity classes. The product category has a category name, percentage best category. Now this is not an entity class, this is a plain Java object class, the POJ class. Same way, if we have order received, we have order collection status, which will tell me how many new orders, what is the revenue, shipped, return, and all those things. We have employee information. So based on the dashboard page, I just created these and these POJ objects. Now this company revenue, I started with converting a simple POJ object class to an entity class. So we need to use @entity annotation and add table structure, defining what is the table name and where it mapped to. So it mapped to my ecom-app, and @at column will define the column name if I want to it. Otherwise it will take this name, but I want to put a different name, so I just put a different name. Nullable false means it make it mandatory in the DB, and then we have a getter and setter. So now we have the entity structure created for one table. We have a database. So how Spring Boot knows to connect? So if I try to run right now, it knows that there is an entity structure, it knows that there is a database to connect, but how Spring Boot is going to map that? Using a JPA. So we have ORM in place, we have a database in place, but still we don't have a JPA in place. So what we need to do is, we need to go on the main class and then use one annotation called entity scan, which is gonna scan the entity class. So entity, let's put that entity scan. Yep, and it need a base packages. So let's put base packages equals my reference to the entity folder, entity package. So let's try to run this now and see whether it works. Maybe let's compile this. And now package. So it failed. Let's see what is the reason for failure. So it's saying no identifier specified for entity. So the reason being because there is no ID column here, which we need for relational database. So what I can do is I can create a separate class saying key entity, right? And then I can put a PK. So this is my ID column, and every time it's required ID column. The only thing is I need to map this class to my company revenue or any other class. So now I can map this ID to any of the entity classes. So if I change the structure of IDs, because ID can be a numeric numbers, ID can be GUIDs also, it will reflect everywhere. So let's go and then extend the key entity. Okay, Now let's try. So this time it built successfully, and now we can go in database and check is any change happen. Yeah, so I can see now that company revenue has been created. The entity has been created. Yeah, the class has been created. So now let's follow the same approach and apply to every other entities. Try to convert those simple Pojo objects to an entity object. So I copied the same structure in all the tables. The only difference is in employee, for example, I didn't put for the specific column because I thought that the column name can be same whatever I declared as a type name. So everywhere I extend the key entity, and then I just put a reference name in the schema. So let's go ahead and try to run and see. So it's built success. Let's see and check in DB. So refresh, and I can see all the table has been created. So now we are able to connect our ORM system to my DB. And as I mentioned that till now there is no JPA. So now the JPA role is going to start because now we have a correct mapping and all those things, persistence. Now the framework is there, which connect my objects to my DB. Now we can make use of JPA. So let's create a package called repositories. And then let's create for company revenue repository. We need to create as an interface. So in this we need to use at repository annotation to define that this is a repository, and what should be the qualifier. So I'll say qualifier as I'll use the same name. So let's say I'll use this name. Yep, make it as a lower C to identify, and then I can extend JPA repository, defining my class objects. So it will be the entity class called company revenue, putting my entity and long. So now this long. Okay, this is plain JP repository, but now this repository has been mapped with your ORM entity object, and by default it will give you a lot of features. So if you go inside this repository, you can see you'll get functions like find all by ID, save and flush, delete and batch, delete all, get one. So all these functions, and it got paging and sorting as well. So all these things by just having extension, by just extending the JPA repository, you will get all those things. Now you want a specific query to return, then we can write an interface and then we can map it up. So let's create a repository. Now there is one more thing that we need to do, is that we created a repository. How a Spring Boot knows? So we need to run a scan. So we need to put enable JPA repository, and then we'll put base packages equals to, let's copy this one, dot repositories rep. Okay, so now my company revenue table is mapped with a JPA repository, and I can use and leverage all the feature of JPA repository. So let's try to replicate the same thing for other entity table as well. So I replicate the same information by creating the interfaces for repository. So now all tables are now linked to a repository. So that's all for this video, and in the next video we're going to move further step-by-step approach. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to continue from the last lecture where we have created the JPA repository and entity structure and map to the database. Now what we are doing is we are going to do some CRUD operations and map those repositories by creating a services so that we can later use those services inside our controllers. So let's get started. So this is the same project that we left last time, and with entities and repositories, and now let's create a package for service, and let's start with our interface for company. Let's create dashboard service. So what we can do is we can in one single service we can use all the repository. Okay, let's create another package for Impel, and I'm gonna create service Impel, and then implement dashboard service. If we need to create a very specific method. Now here I can auto wire my repository. So let's start with company, auto wire. So I auto wired it. So let's create an interface for list, and then I say company revenue get today's revenue dash when I'm going to implement it, implement method, and what I'm going to do is company repository dot find all. So this particular method that we created in dashboard services get all the records from company revenue table. So what I did is I created a few records in company revenue table, and then whenever I use this service I should able to retrieve all my records. So let's go and create the other required dashboard service calls and link them to repository. So I almost replicate the find all function, except one of the scenarios where when I say best category, I need to figure out based on the boolean variable. So when I say, so I need to write a method inside the repository. So let's say product category, and then I say here is, so I need to find all product categories based on they are best categories or not. So find by, and I'll say best category. So this is the query DSL that we talked about, and then in that what I'm going to do is say that boolean best category. Okay, and then so that's it. The JPA will take care of rest of the things, because it says find by best category, and then whatever the value I pass, based on that it will go and list all the product category based on that. So let's use this inside our service, dashboard service. So it'll say product category dot. So now I got this one method, and then I'll say true. So all best categories, I'll get it. So we have created the services. So this is the basic service. Now let's try to do some CRUD operations on one of the table. So for example, employee, let's try to do few more CRUD operations like insert, delete, and all those things. So let's say I would say employee, so void add employee, and then I'll say employee information, and so update employee will have and create for delete. So let's say delete employee, and same thing employee. So I created these CRUD operations. Now it'll ask you to implement. Let's implement those, and now I should have employee information repository add save and employee information. Okay, and then say save employee information, and say, so add and update is more or less same. I have the CRUD operation for the employee information table. So the CRUD operations are ready right now for the employee information table. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about the REST endpoint for the CRUD services which we created in our last lecture. So let's get started. So let's start creating the controller. Start with a package, controller package, and let's create a Java class REST endpoint controller. This will be a REST controller, so let's put an annotation for that, and let's auto wire your service. So private dashboard service, public I want list, and it'll be employee information at all amp. I don't want any parameter, and then I'll say return dashboard service dot get all employees. Request mapping value equals to employees. Okay, so let's run it. So let's see the postman. I'm going to use employees, and I can see pretty much everything in an array. Let's create a post call to save the record. So public string save employee info, and then I can say request body is employee information. Okay, and then if dashboard service dot save dot add employee not equals to null, it's void. So if it's void, then I cannot return anything. So let's return then return employee save employee data saved successfully, else error saving employee info. So let's fix this problem. Dashboard service, when you add it, you just make it so now it should fix up. Yep, let's rerun this. Okay, the missing piece is the mapping. So request mapping method equals to request post, and value equals to let's say employee /add. Okay, let's run this. Okay, so let's call the URL. It's a employee data set successfully. If I go and check in employee, I can see my data is there. So let's work on delete now. Public string delete amp, and I'll say parameter request parameter name equals to amp id value equal, there's no default value, required as true, and then I'll say string pk. So first I need to retrieve based on the pk. So in my repository I don't have anything which is based on that I can get a pk. So let's create a method. So it will be employee information find by pk, and then I'll say final string pk. So I created this method in the repository. I can call that in service as well. So let's create a service. So I got a service created, and then we can implement the service. So let's implement this method, and I'll say repository dot get dot find by pk, and then pass this pk. So now in my controller I can retrieve the pk. So I'll say dashboard service dot delete employee, and then I'll say dashboard service dot get employee with pk. So okay, it's a void. And let's put in the try catch. So try, and then put a catch. In case of any exception, just return error. If there is no exception, then return deleted. Request mapping, put employee.delete. So let's run this and see whether it works or not. Server started, and now this is the URL we need to call with the put method and see. Let's see. it's saying deleted. Refresh it, gone. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about how to set up a web application using TimeLeaf. So let's get started. So these are the two dependencies we are going to use for TimeLeaf. One is the starter and one is the security. We're not going to use security as of now, but in future lectures we are going to use this security feature of TimeLeaf. The other thing that we need to do apart from this is to set up properties for TimeLeaf. So let's put those properties as well. So let's build a project and see whether it compiles. Compile. So let's put our login page here. Or say index.html and put e-commerce. Save it and then run it. I can see that the title that I have put it is coming up correctly. Let's put something else. Save it and rerun. So I got this message, welcome to Spring Boot course. So that's pretty much for setting up a TimeLeaf templates. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about configure Bootstrap 4 and create a static pages for demo application. So as you know, in my previous lecture I was talking about demo applications to create, and in my last lecture I just mentioned how to create a web application using TimeLeaf. So we are going to continue with that, and then now we are going to put Bootstrap 4 and the static pages for the demo applications which we showed on lecture 4, I think. So let's get started on that. So as you see, this is my project which I used for last lecture. For Bootstrap 4 I'm using a SB admin Bootstrap 4 theme. It's freely available on internet, so you can just download it free. So I download it, and then what I need to do is I need to copy few of the stuff from, I copied the CSS folder, JS folder and the vendor folder into my project resource static folder, and I copy the index.html to my index.html inside the template folder. And I didn't change anything much if you open, because by default the reference is vendor, which is inside the static. Static is part of the class path, so anything after that will be referenced here. It will automatically recognize that. So let's start the server now. Okay, so I can see the dashboard has been loaded. These are the three sections that we talked about, and it has been loaded successfully without any issues. So that's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to continue from the last lecture where we finished the creation of the services and linking with the database and JPA repository, and we create all those methods that can provide us the data. Now in this tutorial we are going to create the controllers for specifically for the view. So let's get started. This is the project that we left in the last lecture. It has everything: controller, entity, repository, and services. The controller that we created was for the REST endpoints, but this time we are going to create a controller for the view, and it has all static references. So we need to change those static references to a dynamic references mapping with the controller, and that is something part of our next lecture. So first let's start a server and see where we are. Server started. Let's open in browser, localhost 8080. So I can see this static page is there. So this is all information is static right now. We're going to target this particular section of the company revenue and try to create a controller and get the data from the service. So it'll be controller goes to service, service goes to JPA, JPA goes to database, and then comes back with the data back to the controller. Now how we are going to represent into the controller something, we need a total of revenue, expense, and margin for all the records that we have, and we need a specific records for every month revenue. So let's build the controller for this. So I autowired the dashboard services and I created a get mapping to the root and return the index. So it basically just when you load the localhost 8080, it comes and redirect the same page to the index.html. Now let's start populating. So let's say populate company revenue data. Now in dashboard services we have method to get all the records from the company revenue table. The problem is that this is not how we represent in the page. The page reflects something else. We are not simply showing the data from the database. So we need to do a manipulations and write a custom logic where I can grab those informations and pass it to my controller. So I need to make a changes to my services. So let's do and change the services. Okay, so I created this I changed the function get today's revenue dash method. What I did is I just pass as a hash map so that I can pass different parameters like labels, revenue, and then total. So if you see in the page, you have labels for this, and you have revenue here, and you have the total revenue, total expense, and total margin here. So I just created a hash map, provide all those values. So let's use the so my service is ready with all the information that I need for the page, but now I need to do is I need to map my service data with the view. So using a controller. So I'll use model dot add attribute and I'll say CR company revenue, comma, and then I'll use dashboard service dot total dash and save, run and see whether will have any impact. There'll be no impact because now we have every information is inside this model attribute, but we are not using that model attribute somewhere in the page, so there'll be no changes there. So it still will be a static. Yeah, because if it's dynamic, then these months will be a different format. If you see here in DB, the way I save those records as Jan, Feb, and static it is January, February, like that. So the next step is we need to bind our model attribute in the UI. So let's do that. There are two pieces here. One is on the HTML side, and one is on the JavaScript side, because the chart information is inside the JavaScript. So this is the chart that we are using for revenue, where we are passing labels here and then the revenue here, and the other thing that we are using is the total expense and total revenue and total margin. So these are hard coded, so we are going to change these things. Let's do it. So on the index.html page, there are two changes that I did. Is one is referencing to the namespace for TimeLeaf, and then here I actually created two hidden variables, input tags, two hidden input tags where I'm passing the labels and revenue. I'm gonna use these for my JavaScript, but for revenue and expense and margin, I just simply reference to CR and total revenue. This total revenue actually is mapped to a service here because everything is a hash map. So when it returns back from controller to the view, everything comes as a hash map and tied up to a CR, which we define in our controller CRS. So when I reference it, I say CR.total revenue, and then so let's run it and see whether it works or not. Yeah, and this has been changed now, but this information is still the old one. So let's do the change for the chart as well. So for JavaScript side, what I did is I just get the value from the hidden tag that I created here, and then I split with the comma because they are coming as a comma, and then I just simply put into the label. Instead of having hard-code values, I just reference to that variable. And let's run it now and see whether it works. So now this has been changed, and even I can see here the value is still, they are static, they're not dynamic, but if I go and inspect element, I should have those values inside my the hidden tag. So yes, and the CR revenue, this hidden tag has those value coming in from the controller. So as an assignment, you can just copy this project from the GitHub, just fork this project and just try to do by yourself for the revenue part. Let's go and I'm gonna leave a bestseller category and order received as hard coded. As an assignment, I put inside this lecture that you can go grab the source code and then do it. I'm gonna work on employee information now. So let's do it. So for employee information, what I did is I just simply create a model attribute called EI and then reference to the service which return me all the employee. So now let's go and see where we have employee information in the HTML. It should be here somewhere. So right now these are our hard-coded informations. We are going to convert that into by reading the value from the model attribute that we have set it up. So let's do it. In HTML, what I have done is I just removed all the TRs, the table rows, the static ones, and then I just use the each loop of theme leaf where I reference to amp to my EI. EI is something which is part of my model attribute. And then I use the pose object type names by having from here, and I just map it up. And that's all I did actually to change all my static code to a dynamic data code. And let's go and run it. So right now I can see it has 57 entries, and in my DB I believe I have 9 entries. So server started. Let's go and refresh the page. So I can see 9 entries now, and everything is mapped up, including my name as well. In this page, we have changed the dynamic reference from the static based on the controller for the company revenue chart and from the data table. As a part of this lecture, I'll put up assignment to work on doing the same stuff for the main dash here, the bestseller category, and the order received. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are gonna discuss about implementing Spring Security. So let's get started. So this is the existing project from my last lecture where we left where the dashboard page. So what I did is I renamed my index.html with dashboard.html, and in the index.html I put the information about the login page. So it has the username and it has the password and it has a submit button. So let's run and see whether I'm getting a login screen or not. So now I'm getting a login screen. You click on it, nothing happens, no action. So next thing we need to do is we need to have a login controller. So I already created this login controller. It has root/login and access denied. I didn't create any page for access denied. So if there is no page, the Spring Security will say that page not found. So I'm okay with that. We'll create a security config class, and I'm gonna put all the securities. The other change I did is that on theme leaf controller, which is my old controller and has mapped to root, I changed that root to dashboard. So to access this page I need to go through dashboard, and I return to my dashboard, which is dashboard.html. In pom.xml, I have added a dependency for security, Spring Boot Starter Security project. So now let's start with implementing security. Let's use annotation called configuration because it is a security configuration, and then enable web security. Extends web security configure adapter. Now I need to now you can do two type of authentication. One is in-memory authentication and one is data source authentication while connecting to data source, which is creating a tables, user tables and roles table. For this lecture, I'm just gonna use the in-memory authentication. So let's put that. We need to override in authentication manager builder. So here I'm gonna say dot in-memory authentication dot with the user and let's put user as a user and password as password with the role of user. And let's create one more. Admin let's put name now. Role admin. Let's override one more method called configure the Spring's HTTP security. Okay, here I'll say we need to authorize the request. So let's say authorize request. So we need to permit all the requests with the root. So permit all the request with root. Permit all. Okay. And all the one which has access to user. So again dot and measure. So anything that comes has role user, which we created. Apart from that, any other request need to be authenticated. So now let's put the login and logout. So and form login dot success handler dot login page, which is index dot permit all. We don't need a specific, we need a success handler. So let's create a class called login success handler. Yep, we'll create this class. Okay, this is for success. Now let's talk about what happens when it failed. So and dot log out any request which has invalid HTTP session, true. Clear the authentication, true. And log out and measure any URL with the URL called, so I'll say new and path matcher and say logout. So if I put logout on my URL, I should be logged out. Dot logout success URL. So once it logged out, where it will go? It will go to login logout dot allow them. And let's talk about exceptional handling. In case of exception, what will happen? Let's create another access denied handler. Let's create a class called login success handler. Here. So in the login success handler, what I did is I implement a authentication success handler. I override on authentication success. So I just say that login successful and then redirect them to dashboard page. Same way we have to create for login denied handler. So let's create a login denied handler. Sorry, access denied handler. So in this handler, what I did is I implement the access denied handler. Okay, I think Spring already have this class, so let's change this one to login access denied handler. That way we don't have to provide the full. Yeah. Okay, and then here I'm just using a security context holder get context and authenticate, and if it's not authenticated, it will go to access denied. It include all the resources inside the static folder as well. Now let's auto wire them. So let's say auto wired login success handler. I map that, and then I'll say auto wired access denied handler. So this is mapped up. Okay. Now in time leaf, what we need to do is we need to put somewhere where I can authenticate. We need to call the security for time leaf as well. So here we call this dependency for the time leaf, Spring security dependency. Let's make use of it. So we need to call the namespace for Spring Security 4, and then what we need to do is in the footer I can try. I think it doesn't have any footer, so let's put a span or div somewhere. So inside the form, this is my body container, and let's try after this container. So let's put a span. So in this span, I'm just calling authorize is authenticated, so it is gonna verify. Normally this will be part of a template, the time leaf template, but since I'm using only 2 pages, I'm gonna copy to footer here as well. Okay, so both the pages has that now. Let's try to run and see whether it works or not. So it didn't work, and I got a error that it has to be a password encoder. So one thing that I missed out was when I say I forgot to put nope. Nope is actually to telling the Spring Security that don't apply any password encoder. So once I put this one and then I run it, and if I put anything else, I'll get a message. If I say user and password, say, and I'll get the dashboard page. So that's how the Spring Security has been configured. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about implementing actuator for monitoring. So let's get started. What is actuator? Actuator brings production ready features to our application without having to actually implement those features by ourselves. What it exposes a lot of DevOps operations information, like while running the application, health metrics, info logs, environment, JVM. You can shut down your application as well through REST endpoints, and you can write your own REST endpoints in Spring Boot 2 actually. You can write your own REST endpoint and you can expose to actuator. It uses HTTP endpoints and JMX bean to enable and interact with it. It comes with predefined endpoints. Health and info by default comes, and for other endpoints we need to apply security. So we need to enable them in order to see the information about those other endpoints. So let's get started. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new project for actuator separately. So let's create a quick project. we need a web, and in ops we need actuator. So let's put those. So web and actuator is there. Now let's so now let's run it. No index page. Let's try health actuator. Everything comes to actuator endpoint. So I can see 3 different health and info because they are exposed. So it's saying that status is up. In info doesn't have anything. We can write, we can control through properties, means we can write property to define what are the info, the app info and all those things. Now let's try to expose other endpoints as well by implementing a security. So let's create a security. There is one more thing we need to do, is we need to allow the endpoint exposure to include all. So now, just to make sure that include all the endpoints. So right now health and info is there. Now it should allow everything. Yeah. So now it is, let's open a browser and see. So now it is asking user and then password. So now I can see a lot of references. Bean reference is there. So I can get all the bean data. Loggers, whatever the logs. Mappings. So I got all the production ready features. That's all for this video. Thanks guys. Hello everyone, this is Bhupen Sharma, and in this tutorial we are going to discuss about deploying a jar file on a Unix platform. So this Unix platform can be any Unix platform. There are other ways of deploying the application on Amazon or any other cloud platform or Tomcat by using a WAR file, but in this tutorial we are solely focused on deploying as a jar on a Unix platform. So we are going to deploy Ecom Health app as a jar to the Linux container. The reason being, I'm not deploying the Ecom Dash app, which has a login and dashboard screen, because it connected to a database. So I need to move my database to the cloud environment and connect it. So rather than that, I just make it short video about how we can deploy. So let's deploy this one because it doesn't have any dependency on database. I connected to my EC2 instance and copied the jar file using FileZilla to my EC2, and it is there in, so I can see this is my jar file. So let's see. So what we need to do is, first we need to create a file. So we need to go to system, and then I'll say health app dot service. Let's create this file. Control X, and then I'll give the access to this file, full access. So let's see, sudo and let's access again. Sorry, sudo nano health app. Okay, in the file for the service I created three things: unit, service, and install. Unit just provide information and where the logs will go, and then service will define what is the username and where is my executable file. So I just put the location of that, and then that's it. Save this file. After that I need to run the service command again. System control, yep, and then let's enable so it create a symlink, and then I need to just start. So this is the command to start the service. So now the service has been started, and then it will work as usual. So that's all for this video. Thanks guys.